All right, ladies and gentlemen, calling to order the first hearing of the Readiness Subcommittee on Energy Installations and Environment Program Update, first hearing of the 118th Congress. I'd like to welcome the members of the Readiness Subcommittee for our first official hearing. I'm deeply honored to serve as chairman of this impactful subcommittee and lead its crucial work. I am very pleased, again, to work with Mr. Garamendi as the subcommittee ranking member and was honored to work with him as the ranking member as chairman, to show the bipartisan, when he was chairman, and show the bipartisanship of these issues and supporting our warfighters. I've thoroughly enjoyed working with him over the last year and appreciative of the great work conducted during his time as committee chairman. Thank you to our witnesses for your time and participation in today's hearing to discuss military construction, environmental programs, energy programs, as well as base and facility accounts. And I just want to say right out the gate, it's become a trend, and I wish we could be having this conversation after the release of the president's budget. There is no doubt plenty of issues we can discuss even without the budget figures. I welcome a continued dialogue on these matters as we do see the budget release and as we work through this year's NDAA process. The Armed Services Committee will deliberate a lot this Congress on the present and future capabilities needed for the great power competition that we face in line with the National Defense Strategy and a potential Taiwan contingency. As we discuss these capabilities, we must also recognize the need for investment in new infrastructure as well as the maintenance of our existing infrastructure. Unfortunately, maintenance of existing facilities has been chronically neglected, often to pay for other priorities. And this lack of investment in aging and failing infrastructure has resulted in negative impacts to readiness and retention, as well as inefficient facilities that don't adequately support our intended missions. I think we can do better, and I think our warfighters deserve better. I look forward to discussing the path forward with new military construction and how the services prioritize sustaining existing infrastructure, with the understanding that we must get this mix right to both support our platforms and our service members. Any MILCON and facility sustainment effort must also prepare our military installations at home and abroad for the future challenges with better planning that focuses on resilient infrastructure investments. We have made progress to this end by requiring master plans with previous committee work that we intend to continue. And these master plans consider these risks. The services have begun to submit these master plans for their two most at-risk installations after being required to do it in the FY22 NDAA. However, we must do more to shape the best posture that we can for the future. Nowhere else is the issue of aging infrastructure more evident than our shipyards. The recent operational impacts to dry docks at the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard due to seismic resiliency issues is concerning. I'm sure it concerns everyone here. I'd like to hear from our witnesses today what's being done to remedy this problem, mitigate risk to readiness, and use this as an impetus to look across our shipyards and invest in critical updates to ensure their long-term viability. Our installations also remain largely dependent on commercial electrical grids. I know a lot of work has been done in this space, and I look forward to hearing it, that are vulnerable to any disruptions they suffer. To protect our mission capability, I believe we must continue to pursue solutions like islanding capabilities and generation from microreactors. On the operational side, I am very concerned the department is not as far along as we should be given the threats on the horizon. Our ability to supply energy forward, to sustain operations forward in contested environments in a way that we have not had to do in recent decades it's just critical with today's threat environment. Contested and challenge environments are the new normal, and we need to posture ourselves accordingly. Furthermore, we must endure our installations are free of dependency on energy supplied by our adversaries. It sounds like an obvious statement, but I think we're in a position where we need to do more work there. Recent NDAs have highlighted the threat posed by our reliance on Russian energy at our European command installations. The department has begun this work I look forward to hearing where we are with it, and it's paramount that we develop and adhere to transition plans at every installation under EUCOM. Taking care of our military members is the utmost responsibility of all of us here. And our Defense Department leaders continuously tout people-first strategies, ensuring our service members are the priority, but I remain skeptical, frankly, of this being put into practice when we look at the status of some of our housing and our barracks. We must provide safe barracks, housing, and infrastructure. I know Ranking Member Garamendi shares in this effort and has done a lot of work to that end. Recent NDAs have authorized historic levels of spending for the cleanup of PFAS, contaminated military installations and surrounding areas. We hope to see that momentum continued. And furthermore, in last year's NDA, we authorized $1 billion for the Red Hill Recovery Fund. I think you're seeing a theme here that we are going to continue the work and try not to reinvent the wheel of previous years, despite a switch in the majority. We need to also prioritize making our strategic stockpiles whole, as well as reducing our reliance on adversarial nations for our critical minerals and for our supplies. The DLA has identified, the Defense Logistics Agency has identified 14 critical defense materials that are 100% foreign sourced. That's unacceptable, in my view. We have insufficient national defense stockpile reserves to support essential defense requirements. Of those 14 materials, 11 are sourced from China. Again, unacceptable. This is an unacceptable threat to our national security. I look forward to working with the subcommittee on further solutions in addition to the critical mineral stockpile we've authorized in previous NDAAs. This administration's focus on climate as a national security priority, oftentimes I find that concerning, just to be completely candid. I want to dig into the Department of the Army's strategy to electrify our tanks, fighting vehicles, and others, given the supply chain concerns and other pieces involved. At the end of the day, I think our priority should be on developing and implementing the most lethal capabilities for deterrence and to counter China. And if that so happens to have green effects, I think that's completely appropriate. Finally, the ongoing war in Ukraine and the ever-growing aggressive China are a constant reminder of the importance of this work. Smart investments must be made now. I thank you again, once again, for our witnesses for being here today. I look forward to your testimony, and with that, I turn it over to Ranking Member Garamendi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walsh. I've got all of this written speech that I'm going to give, but I like what you said. I like your priorities. I like what you've laid out, and whether we're going to put a hybrid Abrams tank out on the field or not remains to be seen. But everything that you've talked about, most of what you talked about is what we've done over the last 4 years, and we did that in a bipartisan way. And we will continue to support you and the majority as you go about the agenda that you've laid out here. If I don't read this, my staff's going to be really upset. They spent a lot of time writing this, but I'm going to try to really shorten it. We've been with these witnesses before, as you've said, Mr. Walsh, and we've talked about these issues. We haven't talked about them to the end of the process because the process doesn't end. There's always more to do. And so we're going to be working diligently together on the department's infrastructure. All of the bases, all of the shipyards, all the dry docks, all of those things, they have to be dealt with. And they have to be brought up to modern standards and actually beyond modern standards. We've seen that the general attitude has been to accept risk. It turns out that the acceptance of risk is really risky and leads to a significant degradation of the readiness of the troops, the readiness of the ships, the readiness of the airplanes. Take the shipyards, take the F-35, lots of examples out there. So we need to really be very diligent very diligent in pressing hard to make sure that the bright, shiny things that everybody would like to have, and certainly the defense industrial base would love to make, do not result in a degradation of the essential infrastructure upon which the entire military system relies. I can give examples here. We've accepted the risk of Tyndall Air Force Base being built in a, I don't know, maybe a foot above sea level. Florida, I believe, Mr. Waltz.
Great state out.
You know, it was wiped out, literally wiped out. But yet we accepted the risk of rebuilding at the same location to the tune of several $billion. And I hope I'm not around for the next earthquake that goes, the next hurricane that goes through that. But it may be the same result in the last earthquake, and the last hurricane. My mind is shifted to China Lake and to earthquakes, which is California, and a few other places on the West Coast. And you mentioned, Mr. Waltz, the question of the dry docks. Absolutely critical dry docks that are not going to be able to use for some time. How long have we accepted, how long have we known the risk, the earthquake risk there, and how long have we accepted it till it got to the point where, oh my goodness, it has to be dealt with now or else? And so we can go on and on about those risks. Thank you for mentioning housing, barracks and the like. This committee, even before I became chairman, had dealt with the housing issue. And I suspect 4 or 5 chairmanships beyond you and I will continue to deal with it because it has to be watched all the time. Backsliding is always there, and this is for the troops. And the barracks, you mentioned that, and absolutely true. We have to deal with that. There's an issue that we've not dealt with in the past, and I want to put it on the table for us to think about. This committee, had not really dealt with it, and that is the issue of encroachment. Who is buying land and putting up projects around our military bases? What is that, and what is the threat of that encroachment? It may be a wind turbine that somehow screws up the radar at a Air Force base. Or in the case of Travis Air Force Base, what is this LLC that has literally purchased every piece of property around the base and 14,000 acres beyond that? Who are they? What are they? And it turns out that I think the base commanders have not been charged with the responsibility of watching carefully what's going on outside the base. We need to pay attention to that. We've had this issue in North Dakota, an issue that ultimately resulted in the Chinese company that wanted to buy the land saying, no, you can't, because of the potential security risks associated with it. I want us to pay more attention to it because it's down home, my district, and perhaps in other members' districts also. We've got a lot of work to do. You talked about the energy issues. There is an enormous potential for divisiveness on energy, but if we look at it in the way of cost savings, readiness, availability, your mention of microgrids, Mr. Chairman, that's a piece of that puzzle. There are, small reactors and microgrids. All of these things are out there. Again, this comes back to resiliency. The great deep freeze in Texas, there's some Texas folks around here. What if we had a different strategy? We can go on and on. With your permission, I'd like this wonderful speech that my staff put together to be on the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. I yield.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Garamendi. Again, welcome to our witnesses. Just brief introductions. The Honorable Brenden Owens, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Energy, Installations, and Environment. We have the Honorable Rachel Jacobson, Assistant Secretary of the Army, go Army, Installations, Energy, and Environment. The Honorable Meredith Berger, good to see you again, Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Energy, Installations, Environment, and Mr. Edwin Oshiba, Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Energy, Installations, and Environment. Over to you, Mr. Owens, for your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Waltz. Ranking Member Garamendi, distinguished members of the subcommittee. On behalf of myself and my military department colleagues, Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the department's energy, installation, and environment programs. This is my first time testifying before this subcommittee. I'm 30 days into the job, and I look forward to working with you in the coming months to continue aligning our priorities and resources to support the National Defense Strategy. The 2022 NDS is clear. We are operating in an increasingly complex global threat environment characterized by significant geopolitical, technological, economic, and environmental change. The People's Republic of China remains the department's pacing challenge with its increasingly aggressive efforts to undermine U.S. alliances and security partnerships in the Indo-Pacific. We also face threats from actors like Russia, North Korea, Iran, as well as climate change and other transboundary challenges. Together, these threats not only pressure the joint forces' power projection and maneuver capabilities, but also put the safety and security of the homeland at risk. Countering these threats requires a resilient joint force and defense ecosystem that can operate in a contested environment at home and abroad. As such, we are ensuring that our installations and infrastructure are resilient to a wide range of challenges by implementing policy updates, innovation in how we plan, design, and build, and deployment of technology to counter the diversifying threats we face. In the Indo-Pacific specifically, there are two key priorities that will be critical to the success of this effort: retaining vital mission capabilities in the state of Hawaii and ensuring the critical military construction efforts in Guam and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands remain on track by extending the exemption from the H-2B visa temporary need requirement through 2029. We look forward to partnering with Congress, the state of Hawaii, Guam, the CNMI, and other federal stakeholders in doing the work that's necessary to ensure that these priorities can be addressed. More broadly, we are making significant investments in both installation and operational energy to enhance resilience and reduce demand to improve joint lethality, support distributed operations, and reduce sustainment risks in contested environments. We are improving our approach to facility management to increase the efficacy of our sustainment, restoration, and modernization investments, and to optimize the condition of our facilities. These efforts will enhance our facilities' direct mission support capabilities, and they will also enhance the health, well-being, and readiness of our service members and their families. Our installations, however, do not exist in a vacuum, and we recognize that the department cannot achieve these goals on its own. Defense communities and host nations provide indispensable support to the mission. Acknowledging this interconnectedness, it is imperative that we be good stewards of the environment in addition to being conscientious and committed partners with the communities that support our installations, our service members, and their families. To that end, we remain committed to maintaining our robust environmental cleanup program, improving the safety and efficiency of our facilities, and improving the quality of life for our military personnel by ensuring access to safe, quality, and affordable housing. The department is committed to working in close coordination with the U.S. interagency, state, local, tribal, territorial, and industry partners, as well as our international allies, to achieve these goals. I would like to highlight specifically the progress we've made to develop and demonstrate PFAS-free alternatives for aqueous film-forming foam. Congressional authorizations and appropriations made it possible for the department to continue its ongoing work to evaluate fluorine-free alternatives. Based on the hard work of numerous dedicated DoD employees and industry partners, the Navy published a new military spec for replacement foams in January. Several fluorine-free foams are currently proceeding through the military specification qualification process, and the department plans to begin the transition to the use of these products this summer. So while we implement new technology to avert future risk, we continue our cleanup efforts intended to safeguard the health and well-being of our people. Nothing is more important than our people: soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, guardians, and their families. The investments we make to improve the built and natural environments where they live and work are investments that pay off by improving their health and well-being. We appreciate Congress's and this subcommittee's continued support for these efforts, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. Ms. Berger?
Chairman Waltz, Ranking Member Garamendi, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. The Department of the Navy's Energy Installation and Environment portfolio is foundational to making sure that our sailors, Marines, and civilians are ready, able to do all that our nation asks them to do. I started my last statement before this committee with an ask. Today I start with a thank you for the inclusion of the Fallon Range Training Complex modernization in this year's NDAA. This is an example of the way things should be. We worked with Congress, tribal, local, state, and federal partners to ensure we protected culture, the environment, and the economy to guarantee the readiness for the fleet, making sure that they can train like they fight. At that time, we were also at the beginning of responding to a terrible event, the contamination of drinking water from the fuel spill at Red Hill. I'm proud to report progress and also to commit to the work that is still before us. Today, the water is safe to drink, and the Navy is conducting long-term monitoring to ensure there is no fuel contamination. Secretary of Defense Austin has directed Joint Task Force Red Hill to safely and expeditiously defuel Red Hill, and Navy to the permanent closure of Red Hill. And we're working on these monumental tasks together. With every action we take, we are prioritizing the health and safety of the people, environment, and communities in Oahu. We recognize that earning trust takes hard work and commitment and relies on all sides. We're working every day to keep up our end of the bargain, and we're grateful to the partnership of the people of Hawaii. Secretary Del Toro has identified 3 enduring principles that guide the work of the Department of the Navy: strengthen our maritime dominance, our people, and our partnerships. In my role, I implement Secretary Del Toro's guidance by focusing on 3 cross-cutting areas: communities, critical infrastructure, and climate action. Communities are where our people come together, the districts you represent, the towns where our installations are, and the environment and economies that surround them, that enable our sailors and Marines to live, train, and operate. I'm talking about communities like Southern California, where late last summer, record-breaking temperatures above 100 degrees Fahrenheit caused record-breaking demands on the grid of more than 50,000 megawatts. Utility operators were ready to mandate rotating power outages, but instead, the Navy unplugged 20 ships from the grid, and the Marine Corps shifted from the commercial grid to its microgrid, ensuring that neither the Naval Force's mission nor the lives of the citizens were interrupted. The example above also demonstrates the second C, critical infrastructure. Energy security is critical to mission success. More broadly, critical infrastructure is the means to our ends. Our Navy and Marine Corps installations located in the United States and around the world are essential shore platforms from which we project our power. Currently, we see infrastructure that is weakened because of age, vulnerable to physical and cyber threats, and a changing climate. We recognize the need to drastically change our approach, and the Department of the Navy is beginning planning on a 30-year infrastructure plan that is proactive and anticipates the requirements of our future force and their mission. We protect our communities and critical infrastructure with a third C, climate action. No matter what we call it, extreme weather, temperatures, a rising sea, and depleting water sources, among other challenges, are threatening the Naval Service's installations and investments, the infrastructure that supports our critical missions, complicating logistics and demanding more disaster and conflict response from the Navy and Marine Corps while hampering their ability to respond. Bless you. These factors are changing our operational environment and by default, changing the cost and calculus when it comes to mission success. We build resilience across the people and platforms of the fleet as a warfighting advantage, a tactical, operational, and strategic enabler. Ashore, we're making our structures, power grids, and fuel distribution systems and water lines more survivable. Afloat and forward deployed, we are untethering from long and contested logistics tails to ensure we can stay on station longer, operate securely, independently, always keeping mission first. Climate change can be used as a tool and a weapon. We see that across the conflict continuum, and Mr. Chairman, we talked about energy as a weapon last year. We will continue to build our resilience, reduce the threat, and promote innovation to ensure that the Navy and the Marine Corps remain the world's greatest maritime fighting force in every environment. Thank you.
Garamendi and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify on the current state of Army's installations and to answer any questions you may have. I'm grateful to the committee for its continued support and for its commitment to Army's soldiers, families, civilians, and soldiers for life. I look forward to working with you to help build the force of 2030 and beyond. To realize Army's 2030 goals, the future of installations must be now. Installations are at the epicenter of everything we do in the Army. They're where we train, work, learn, and live. To strengthen Army readiness and build the force of the future, we must be laser-focused on providing state-of-the-art installations. I am pleased to report that with the help of Congress, we are making progress. We are continuing our investments in barracks, with over $11 billion planned between fiscal years 2024 and 2032. We are constructing new child development centers at multiple locations. We are building on congressional directives to deliver high-quality family housing and strengthen our oversight of the privatized housing providers. Each of these measures will help us recruit and retain soldiers and families. A key component of creating installations of the future is improving our infrastructure and tackling our deferred maintenance backlog. These challenges will take focus and strategic spending to slow the progression of these deteriorating facilities. With timely, adequate, predictable, and sustained funding, we can continue to reduce our maintenance backlog. I thank the committee for your support in that regard. Resilient installations foster ready soldiers, beginning with reliable access to energy. We have all witnessed threats to the electric grid, whether from cyber attacks, physical attacks, or severe weather events. Installations can't afford to lose power when the commercial grid goes down. That is why we are developing on-site carbon-free power generation, battery storage, and a microgrid to support critical missions at all Army installations. Thanks to congressional authorities, we are collaborating with third parties to guarantee energy resilience without the need for upfront expenditures by the Army. An integral part of installation management is environmental stewardship and protection of natural, cultural, and archaeological resources. Installations are home to 261 threatened and endangered species, 1.3 million acres of wetlands, and over 85,000 archaeological sites. Our success as an environmental steward is due in part to the Army's Compatible Use Buffer Program, which is marking its 20th anniversary. The Army's exemplary stewardship of lands and resources reflects meaningful collaboration with state and local governments, tribes, landowners, and other stakeholders. The Army also bears the responsibility for cleaning up pollution at current and former Army sites. We share concerns about PFAS chemicals, and we are taking our obligations to address PFAS seriously in a transparent manner. Ensuring our soldiers and civilians are ready to support the Army mission requires prevention of accidents and injuries. The Army recently implemented the Army Safety and Occupational Health Management System. This modern safety-first program provides comprehensive oversight of each installation's safety and occupational health programs and seamlessly integrates essential safety practices into daily operations. Installations provide the foundational support of our people. As we build the Army of the future, we must make strategic investments in our installations today, using the most cutting-edge technologies, innovative public-private partnerships, and streamlined processes to accelerate results. Although this work will not be completed overnight, the future of our installations is happening right now. Thank you for your continued support of our soldiers, families, civilians, and Soldiers for Life. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Oshiba.
Thank you, Chairman Waltz, Ranking Member Garamendi, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I am honored to join my colleagues this afternoon and equally honored to represent the nearly 700,000 airmen and guardians that defend our nation each and every day. We are thankful for your consistent support over the years, specifically in the areas of energy, installations, and environment. In the December 1941 edition of the Society of American Military Engineers Journal, General Hap Arnold, in assessing the state of the Army Air Corps at the time, said the following: "Air bases are a determining factor in the success of air operations. The two-legged stool of men and planes would topple over without this equally important third leg." He goes on to justify his words using the experiences of Germany and the United Kingdom in the European theater, where the resiliency of airfields, and in some cases the lack thereof, made the difference between victory and defeat. General Arnold didn't mention the Pacific, but I'm sure General MacArthur would have made a very similar statement given the importance of airfields in his island hopping campaign. 82 years later, these words continue to ring true. They hold true for air and space operations. They hold true for airmen and guardians. They hold true for air and space weapon systems. And they hold true for air and space bases. We view that third leg, our bases, as foundational to enabling and projecting combat power in air, space, and cyberspace. Everything we do begins and ends at our air and space force bases. The department remains committed to ensuring they are ready by investing in the right capabilities at the right time in the right place and with a team of trained and equipped airmen and guardians. Resilient against a full range of natural and man-made threats, and optimized for effective and sustainable mission execution. Since 2019, the department's infrastructure investment strategy has served as our roadmap to make our bases ready and resilient through decisions meant to optimize the balance between effectiveness and efficiency. The strategy informs policy and investment decisions supporting weapon system modernization and combatant command priorities, while balancing the need to recapitalize our aging infrastructure and facilities which improve the quality of work and life for our airmen, guardians, and their families. To that end, we recognize the crux of successful operations rests with our airmen and guardians. Our missions would be impossible to accomplish without them. This underscores the need to balance operational priorities with preserving the readiness and resilience of our most important resources, our airmen, guardians, and their families. We continue to emphasize continued quality of life investments in housing, dormitories, child development centers, and other support facilities. I want to thank Congress for your generous support in this area. Additionally, we remain committed to ensuring the safety and health of our service members and families who work and live on our installations and in our surrounding communities. We greatly appreciate Congress's substantial funding for environmental cleanup and research, including resources to tackle PFAS, which help us accomplish this important priority. Finally, we are pursuing policies, investments, and activities that increase our agility, energy diversification, and quote-unquote lethality per gallon. This improves our ability to field and sustain a combat-credible force now and in the future. By reducing the energy demand of our aircraft, we are increasing the range and cargo carrying capacity of these legacy platforms. And by broadening the aperture of financing opportunities to include smart third-party investments, matched to energy vulnerabilities identified through in-depth planning and realistic exercises, we improve mission assurance through energy assurance. In summary, your Department of the Air Force is committed to preserving ready and resilient installations, our platforms to enable and project combat power using a strategy which optimizes operational effectiveness and resource efficiency as part of our focused and determined one team to win our one fight. Chairman Waltz and Ranking Member Garamendi, thank you again for the opportunity to testify today. We appreciate your continued support of our energy installations and environment enterprise, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. At this time, we'll go to questions. I'll begin by just saying, as the committee is going to get tired of hearing me say this, but we have a teachable moment right now with what's going on with the Russian military in terms of readiness and how much that matters. Along those lines, as I mentioned in my opening statement, recent NDAAs have sought to wean the department and the services off their dependence on Russian energy, but we still have a problem. We're not there. Following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, this became even more pressing. In the 23 NDAA, we established a DoD goal, or a goal for DoD, to eliminate use of Russian energy at all main operating bases in EUCOM within 5 years. The provision also required planning for energy security, resilience, mitigation, to reduce reliance on Russian energy for any new military base in EUCOM. So, Mr. Owen, if you could start with just update us on the status of eliminating reliance on Russian energy in EUCOM. How are we ensuring energy resilience for both main operating bases and our smaller installations across EUCOM? I know the NDAA requires you to identify those, I believe, by June, those bases, and then start implementing the plan. But if you could update us where you are on that process.
Thank you for the question. I think you're exactly right. As I've watched from the outside, the energy markets deal with the pivot away from Russian energy in Europe, it's been apparent that the things that have already been pointed out, that energy as a weapon, the reality of energy as a weapon is here, and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon. Relative to the specific things that are underway within DoD, there are people at this table who probably are better positioned to answer that, although I will take that question for the record. Pulling back from that, one of the things that is apparent to me this early on is that all of the things that we are doing to maintain mission assurance within the United States are things that we need to be aggressively deploying in EUCOM, in Europe. So that is efficiency, reducing the amount of energy that we need, resilience, reliability, and working with our partners and allies in these places to make sure that we are advancing our ability to be independent from any risks associated with energy supply.
Mr. Oshiba, can you address that as well? My understanding is Ramstein was on, it's on the host nation grid, right? So therefore it's on Russian gas, Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany. At one point, my understanding was we exported domestic coal. We moved away from that about a decade ago, but I think we moved from one dependency to another. So can you address where we're going?
Thank you for the question, sir. You're right. What we are doing and what we are focused on is completing our installation energy plans in the EUCOM theater. We finished the one at RAF Lakenheath in the UK earlier this year. Ramstein is actually days away from being completed. We got the draft back in, and that focus area is on both what are the sources of energy we have as well as vulnerabilities that we need to mitigate moving forward. We have 4 more that we plan to accomplish this year: Aviano Air Base in Italy, RAF Menwith Hill, and Mildenhall back in the UK, and Spangdahlem Air Base in Germany. And that's been our focus area. Once we get those plans done, the idea is to then turn that into requirements that we can apply our resources to.
Great, thank you. My other question, then I want to move on to Ranking Member Garamendi and the members. Again, along the lines of reducing dependency on our adversaries, when we just cannot continue along this path, I understand a number of installations are moving to solar. It's not only carbon reducing, but it's energy diversifying. Obviously, you need battery and storage for that. I can tell you, for example, Florida Power and Light is moving to 30 million panels by 2030. However, they source them from China. And we can point to the irony of one of the largest solar producing plants in the world in Western China on forced labor. And if you follow the transmission lines, are being powered by coal, and China is opening more coal-fired plants than us and the rest of the world combined. So, talk to me about the sourcing of your panels and the sourcing of your battery materials. Are they being sourced domestically, or are you also, even if you buy from domestic utilities who are ultimately buying from China, and what's the department's plan to reduce that dependency? Go with Mr. Owen or anyone who wants to dive in. Obviously, that's a department strategy, understanding your 30 days on the job.
It is, sir, and I really appreciate that. I hope I don't have to use that get out of jail free card very much.
You only get one.
Yeah. All right. I think I really like the way that you have drawn a complete picture of the energy ecosystem, because the irony of solar panels powered by coal is truly something that we are aware of. I think that the onshoring of these critical capabilities is something that we have as part of a larger industrial base strategy that's going on within other parts of DoD, with other parts of the acquisition and sustainment team within DoD. So in terms of the work that's going to be undertaken under the Battery Materials Initiative, under the IRA, under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the CHIPS Act, I think all of those things are moving us in the right direction in terms of being able to divest ourselves from these vulnerabilities that you've correctly pointed out.
Ms. Jacobson, could you, you mentioned specifically, and I get it, it's carbon reducing, but as I said in my opening remarks, that has secondary and tertiary effects when China controls the cobalt mines in the Congo, and that's necessary for battery storage. That's an issue. Can you talk to me about that supply chain surety?
And Chairman Waltz, thank you very much for that question. It is absolutely essential that we address supply chain throughout our portfolio, but especially here where, as you say, China and other countries control the supply of those critical minerals. And because we are so intent on putting islanding power on every single installation through a microgrid along with battery technology, it's very, very important to us. We recognize that the challenges of relying on foreign sources of mining and processed minerals, that we have to bring that domestically. And we're teaming with DOD and other federal agencies in this effort to stimulate domestic mining and processing of these minerals so that we can produce batteries domestically. And so many partners in industry are already taking this on, as you know. There's huge investment in domestic battery manufacturing along with sourcing of those raw materials. DOD is using the Defense Production Act, as was set forth in a presidential executive order, and we're involved in the federal consortium for advanced batteries as part of DOD. But Army is committed to doing our part to make sure, again, that we have a robust and secure domestic industrial base for batteries.
I'll yield to Mr. Garamendi, but I'll just say, from my perspective, I understand we're charging headlong into our climate plans and executing those plans, but we cannot trade risk to climate to risk to force, right? And I will be looking at detail. I understand what we have to do, but I'll be looking at details of how the department's actually doing it. Or do we need to tap the brakes on some of these plans until that onshoring can be complete? Over to you, Mr. Garamendi.
Can I be your partner as you explore all of those issues? Very, very important. We have to do that. I would just add, and then a couple of questions, that the other pieces of legislation, you mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure and the CHIPS Act, and the science in the CHIPS Act, are all intended to deal with the totality of the energy issue. And the military is a piece of that, and certainly will be the beneficiary of those other actions. With regard to onshoring the energy systems, if you want to take advantage of the tax credits in the legislation, and they're very, very significant, it has to be made in America. And so that'll bring a lot of that back home on the tax side of it.
Would the gentleman yield for 1 second on that?
Please.
But Ford Motor Company is partnering with CATL, which is a Chinese company, to get the tax credit. So that's where I think if it,
Well, there ought to be a law.
I agree.
And we ought to watch, we have to watch that very carefully. There'll be a lot of ways to escape and to take advantage inappropriately. And so it is our task and the oversight to do that. And if we do, we'll be able to resolve those particular problems. There's so many different pieces to this puzzle. And we need to make sure that the departments are looking at all of the opportunities and engaged in all of these areas. So, there's information that all of us might have. We should bring it to the attention of our committee as it involves the installations, the energy systems, or the environmental pieces of it. And if we do, we'll be making some very, very good progress. I don't know how much time I have to ask questions, but I'm certainly opining here for a while, so forgive me for that. But there are some things that are going to be really important as we go forward. And I'm going to go back to something that I've been bothering me all these many, many years, and that is the facilities themselves, the depots, the repair facilities, the shipyards, and in the testimony, all of you mentioned, or at least touched on this, on the issues of the necessity of improving, upgrading, and indeed even making viable these critical facilities. And I would like you to quickly provide us with assurance that these are high priorities. We didn't bring up the arsenals and the making of 155 artillery shells, which I suppose we could spend time on. but that's included in this. So let's just go down the line. Let's start with the Navy. How many times do we have to talk about the PSYOP program? Please don't tell it's 30 years. Tell me what you're doing this year and the next 4 years. And then we'll go to the other bases. Please.
Yes, Congressman Garamendi, as we focus in the near term, we are taking steps on what we see as an historic opportunity, and thank you to Congress for the funding to do it for our shipyard infrastructure optimization plan. This is a place where we have area development plans for 2 of our shipyards on the East Coast, and we continue forward to make progress in all of those in all of those efforts in incremental and in steps. This is a place where we can integrate some of what you were just talking about in terms of the IRA and the IIJA. There's tremendous opportunities to make sure that we're reaching that end state of resilient infrastructure that supports the mission that is critical that comes out of those shipyards. And in parallel, we have our organic industrial base, some of our fleet our fleet areas and our facilities that support some of our aviation depots and others, where we're also investing and making sure that we are keeping those up to scruff, so that way we can ensure that we are supporting the mission.
Specifically, you've got 4 dry docks that are not being used now for earthquake. Specifically, what is the situation? If you can share it with us, if it's classified, we'll take it up elsewhere. The four dry docks in Washington State.
Yes, sir. Let me take the details for the record for you, but we moved swiftly to shut down when we saw that safety and readiness concern, and we have put forward the projects that will get us on track to be able to start to make those corrections, already starting on 2 of the dry docks, and I will be glad to follow up with you in detail to provide exactly where everything is.
The 1st of March is nearby. How about by the end of March?
Yes,
The
Congressman.
details.
Absolutely.
I think I'm out of time, Mr. Chairman, but I'd go down the line and let's let it go at that.
Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And indeed, I agree with Chairman Mike Waltz that energy is so critical for our continuity at our installations, and additionally, a great opportunity, and that's small modular reactors. And I really always enjoy working with Congressman Garamendi to fill in puzzle pieces. And a puzzle piece is small modular reactors. And I'm really grateful that in meeting with our allies last week in the Czech Republic, they're making tremendous progress on small modular reactors. And they're in a contest, a good one, with Romania to see who can build the first. And we need to be there too. And so I hope every effort is being made to develop. And in particular, Mr. Oshiba, the Air Force, is it on track with the guidance provided by the 2021 National Defense Authorization Act to identify suitable locations for development and operation of microreactors, small modular reactors, for the year 2027? And I would tell you, a beautiful location for energy independence, and it'd be wonderful to spend a lot of time there, is the beautiful territory of Guam. And then after you do that, I want to invite you to South Carolina. The Savannah River Nuclear Laboratory is 310 square miles. It's probably the largest open area or secure area, and it's really close to Augusta National Golf Course, so it's a good place to visit. And but indeed, those are 2 locations that come to mind.
Congressman Wilson, I think I feel like I've swung behind the ball and missed twice. But we do have a small modular reactor pilot project going on right now at Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska. It was chosen based upon the reliance of the power system there to a coal-fired power plant that we need to get rid of. So we've actually gone out with a request for proposals. We received some very attractive proposals. We're in the process now of going through the licensing process with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And from what I can tell, from what I've heard so far, everything is going along very, very smoothly. We've gotten a lot of interest, a lot of community support, and I've taken note of the 2 other candidate locations you've mentioned.
And indeed, we need to work with our NATO allies, Czech Republic and Romania, but gosh, you can't have a better location than beautiful Guam. You get to go to the beach, and nothing as good as Savannah River Nuclear Laboratory with its proximity to Augusta National. Okay, along with that, Secretary Owens, the Department of Defense's Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration Program, known as REPI, is a vital tool for preserving the training, missions, and operations of military installations in South Carolina Midlands region, including Fort Jackson, which is the Army's largest and most active initial entry training center, by protecting more than 20,000 acres throughout the Midlands from incompatible development that would threaten military readiness. If the DoD continues the trend of increasing the budget for REPI, as DoD has done in recent years, what locations across the United States would be prioritized to ensure preserving training, missions, and operations at military installations? We'll make the entire state of California an open space. That would be.
Might be some arm wrestling up there if that's proposed. I think the REPI program is an excellent example of the type of capability that can be deployed when compatible use is something that we are focused around. My understanding of the way that program operates is that we work with the military departments to understand what their needs are and then prioritize projects according to how we can best serve the military departments from a readiness and mission assurance standpoint.
And additionally, I would like to ask in regard to the United States European Command Area of Operations, what additionally have we done to reduce our reliance on the Putin's utilities into countries such as Bulgaria and Romania?
We've continued to drive efficiency in essentially looking at all the things that our partners and allies were doing in Europe. We have taken steps that are similarly aggressive on the energy efficiency side of things at our installation.
And indeed, with the pipelines through Ukraine, hopefully things are changing. And so I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Sherrill.
Thank you. It's wonderful to see all of you. Nice to see you, Secretary Jacobson. Thank you for joining me at the expo at the Pentagon as we saw some of our future energy-saving technologies. Last year, I had the opportunity to visit and tour Picatinny Arsenal in my district, and I was able to go through the Software Center, which really houses some of our most highly talented workforce winning awards as, quite frankly, the building is falling down around them. Highlights include peeling paint, leaks during rainstorms. It really is unfortunate given that we continue to face recruiting shortfalls, and here we are trying to recruit some of the most talented workforce and trying to do so with these aging labs and infrastructure. So it really makes it difficult to attract top talent. And I know the Pentagon has expressed concern regarding growing deficiencies in critical laboratory infrastructure across the department. Heidi Shue, Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, said during a May 2022 congressional hearing that her top priority is upgrading the department's labs. So what progress and updates can you provide on how the DoD is prioritizing which labs to upgrade? And when can Picatinny Arsenal's 2 labs and 4 engineering facilities maybe expect to be upgraded? Secretary Jacobson.
Thank you so much, Congressman Sherrill. It's very nice to see you again, and thank you so much for visiting our Energy Expo. It was a great day to have you there. We fully share your concern about the aging facilities that house our incredibly important labs. And we recognize that by not addressing these facilities and upgrading them to acceptable standards, we do lose talent. And we recognize that part of making sure our facilities are in good shape, that we have the sustainment funding, the MILCON funding, the restoration and modernization funding to accomplish necessary repairs, that presents a recruiting challenge when we don't do that. We are prioritizing using a lot of different tools and models to determine which infrastructure is at most risk, where does it fall in terms of a design, if it's a MILCON project. And we, every year, go through this, facilities investment process to make sure that we are addressing the most important need. And with respect to the 2 labs at Picatinny Arsenal, I commit to getting back to you about specifics about status of modernization and upgrades at those labs, because I agree they are critically important, and we want to recruit the best talent available. Thank you.
I appreciate that. It was, as I met with the general, one of his top concerns as well. So thank you so much. I really do appreciate that and look forward to hearing from you. Last May, the Marine Corps Logistics Base Albany became the first DoD installation to achieve net zero electricity status, with the base producing 100% of the energy they use. They were able to do so through incorporating innovative energy technologies such as biomass steam turbines, landfill gas generators, and advanced microgrid controls into their installation. Other carbon pollution-free resources include wind and solar power alternatives, including new systems such as GAF Energy's integrated solar roofs that directly integrate solar technology into roof shingles. So Secretary Berger, congratulations on that success at reaching net zero. Can you elaborate on some of the challenge that MCLB Albany faced in achieving net zero, as well as lessons learned, recommendations, and takeaways from that process so other services can avoid those pitfalls as they work towards net zero installations?
Congresswoman, thank you. We're very excited about this, and I had the honor of going down with the Commandant of the Marine Corps to be able to celebrate this milestone with him. And the first thing that he talked about was how this was war fighting. This was about mission success. This is a logistics space which is foundational to the Marine Corps. And so as we talk about a contested logistics environment and how we are facilitating the way that we support the fight, it's just a wonderful example in a number of ways. This is a testament to the Marines who were committed year after year, commanding officer after commanding officer, to work with the community that surrounded them through trial and error and continuity of commitment.
Ms.
to
Berger,
make sure.
I hate to interrupt you. If you could submit the rest for the record.
I'll take
member's
that
time
for
is
the record.
expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I yield back.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the chair, Congressman Waltz, hit on this a little bit with regard to solar panels, battery technology, and I will tell you that, Secretary Owens, I do think that the DOD should make it very clear that the DOD, the United States Department of Defense, is not going to purchase any vehicle that utilizes CATL or any other Chinese battery technology. I refuse to believe that with all of the great companies in this country and with all of the great minds at Georgia Tech, MIT, and everywhere else in this country, that we in this country cannot develop better technology than the Chinese have. And if it takes us 12, 18, 24 months to do it, then that's better than sending people who don't share our interests or our values U.S. tax dollars to. And so I think that corporate America is going to have to understand that if they're going to partner with China, then they're not going to sell their vehicles to the Department of Defense. That said, I realize part of that manufacturing is not going to come back to the U.S. It doesn't all have to come back to the U.S. It's just we shouldn't be buying it from people who don't share our interests or our values. Secretary Oshiba, can you briefly explain what materials the Air Force considered for its facility to be built under the pilot program on the increased use of sustainable buildings?
Congressman Scott, I apologize. I may have to take that one for the record as far as the details go.
My understanding is that you only considered concrete. Is that correct?
For the pilot project that we are undertaking at, I think it's at Patrick Air Force Base, that was the one material that we focused on for that one project. Yes.
And so the whole purpose of the project is innovative concepts, new materials. Why didn't you consider cross-laminated timber?
Sir, I would have to take that one for the record. I'm not sure exactly why we didn't look at a broader range of materials. I do know the focus was specifically on concrete, and then we also looked at what other kinds of resilient design techniques that we could incorporate as part of the design for that specific area.
There's also been language that's specific to, not telling you that you have to use it, but that you have to consider cross-laminated timber and the use of cross-laminated timber. It's certainly a much more renewable resource than concrete is. I mean, when you take concrete down, you create a pile of rubble that nothing can be done with. And so I just want to make sure that cross-laminated timber is part of the discussion as we look to.
So we could certainly take a look at that specifically, and if it's not there, then I don't see why we couldn't consider it.
I would appreciate that. And then Secretary Jacobson, the Army somewhat did the same thing. But in your testimony, you say, while lower emission building materials are in development, these materials are not currently at the appropriate technology readiness level for direct implementation in the project. But other countries and the private sector are using cross-laminated timber now. Can you explain those comments further?
Congressman Scott, thank you for the question. And I want to start by saying that we have two projects underway at Joint Base Lewis McChord using sustainable material. They're both barracks projects. The first one, as you mentioned, is using sustainable low-carbon concrete, but the second one is going to use cross-laminated timber. Really, it was just a planning issue with the Army Corps of Engineers, and they were certain way along in the planning for that first barracks, and to change the material so substantially would have affected the timing of the construction and so forth. But the second barracks project for fiscal year 25 will be made of cross-laminated timber. We are committed to that.
Well, as somebody from the private sector, I think that you will find that the more options you have with the way you construct buildings,
Yes.
not only are you going to get a better building, but you're going to get it at a better cost. And so I would hope that you would consider cross-laminated timber where it can be used. I realize there's some situations where it's probably not appropriate, but where it is appropriate, I hope that you'll consider it. And again, Secretary Owens, I know you're new to the job, but I will tell you, we're not going to spend DOD dollars on Chinese technology for batteries. And if it slows us down 12, 18, 24 months.
The gentleman's time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Scott. The chair recognizes Mr. Davis from North Carolina.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, to the ranking member as well. Fort Bragg, North Carolina, is an installation that's home of some of the most elite military units, as we understand. Also have understanding that the North Carolina Department of Transportation has offered to take over maintenance of roads at Fort Bragg as soon as the Army brings the roads up to the DOT standards. Letting NC DOT take over maintenance would save the Army nearly $400,000, we estimate, in maintenance per mile at Fort Bragg, which we understand have over 1,500 miles of road total. There are many examples of public-private partnerships and third-party financing that have led to vast improvements in conditions and sustaining infrastructure. Yet the Army here remains resistant to this program. At this time, when the Army is facing multi-million dollars of maintenance backlog and facing hard choices about how to use dollars, the Army should be using all tools at its disposal to improve infrastructure, especially when the continued decline of these roads are present. So does the Army have any alternative plan to correct these conditions and invest in installations such as Fort Bragg?
Congressman Davis, thank you very much for that question, because the programs, of course, that you're talking about, intergovernmental service agreements, Army is the biggest user across the department of those programs. And we recognize that they save enormous amount of costs to the taxpayer because of making these agreements with state and local agencies who have the expertise to supplement the expertise that Army simply doesn't have. We recently entered into such an agreement for road maintenance with the state of Texas, where the state of Texas Department of Transportation will provide road maintenance for all, and this was actually with all the other services, for all services in Texas. I am not familiar with why there's any progress not being made on an intergovernmental services agreement at Bragg with respect to road maintenance and working with the DOT, but I will find out and make sure we get back with you.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, Camp Lejeune has a long history of service members that's been harmed by environmental contaminations, specifically dealing with the water. In recent years, we've learned that service members have been exposed to another contaminant, PFAS, that exposes them to additional health risk. In the fiscal year 21 NDAA, you were asked to provide a timeline and cost estimate for cleanup of all sites that's been contaminated by the PFAS. The response to that requirement indicated that while the Navy has begun the cleanup process, phase 2 of the process of the remedial investigation and feasibility study will not be completed until the last quarter of fiscal year 2029, which means we are probably looking at 2030 before the meaningful cleanup. My question is, with a timeline like that, explain how you believe that the department is fulfilling this commitment to clean up this responsibility here of cleanup at Camp Lejeune in particular. And why is it taking so long? Why will it take so long?
Congressman, we share your concern for people who are harmed by contaminants in water and take that very seriously. And anybody who has had exposure should get the medical care to which they're entitled to from all the different places that it is provided. I'll need to take for the record what the time is that will take us out to 29 and be happy to follow up with you on that answer so that you get the details that you're looking for.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. The chairman recognizes himself for 5 minutes. Thank you each for being here today. During my time as chairman of the Madison County Commission in Huntsville, Alabama, I saw firsthand the impact a strong community can make on an Army installation. To name a few instances, at Redstone Arsenal, the region pulled together to move the most popular entrance back 3/4 of a mile to comply with new regulations and growth of the installation. We built new officers and base leadership housing, contributed over $500 million to improve infrastructure, started new partnerships with some of the best research universities in the nation. And my personal favorite, we built a $55 million minor league baseball stadium, the Rocket City Trash Pandas, which sits right outside of Redstone Arsenal, along with a $50 million amphitheater at no cost to the Department of Defense, because it was the right thing to do to support our war fighters, their families, and our contractors. Quality of life makes a difference. With the DoD facing a maintenance backlog of around $130 billion, my question is, what can the communities do to better serve their installations?
Thank you for the specific examples of what I believe to be very true relative to the interdependency of defense communities and installations. The Office of Local Defense Community Collaboration is a program that is run as a defense field agency that is resourcing communities to be able to look at that question specifically. So to try to find out what needs the department has in communities, what OLDCC can provide to make it possible for those communities to come to the table as partners, as collaborators, to identify the places that we should be partnering together to improve quality of life for all of the people in the community. 70% of our service members and their families don't live on installations. They live in the community. So specific to any ideas right now, I'd be happy to take that for the record. But I think you've pointed out some specific examples of quality of life improvements that could be used other places to be replicated to improve the conditions for our service members. And Trash Pandas is a outstanding name. That's really commendable.
It's been great for our community, no doubt.
I'll
Thank
bet,
you.
yeah.
The next question is, what benefit has the Defense Community Infrastructure Pilot Program provided for installations?
I have a list in the binder. I'd be happy to share that with the committee for specific things that have happened. But DCIP is another example of a program that is, again, organized and operated by OLDCC to be able to provide the resources to stitch together the infrastructure that exists on the other side of the fence line that our military service members and our communities rely on.
Thank you. Ms. Jacobson, the Ukraine conflict has highlighted shortfalls within the U.S. defense production capacity and supply chain. I think we can all agree it's better that these issues be fixed before we find ourselves in the middle of our own conflict. In Alabama, we have Army Material Command at Redstone Arsenal and the Combat Vehicle Center of the Free World, and one of the largest storage and distribution centers of ammunition and missiles at Anniston's Army Depot. My question is, what lessons has the Army learned regarding the ability of our arsenals and ammunition facilities to meet future wartime demands?
Thank you very much, and thank you for your support of Redstone Arsenal. We really appreciate it. It's obviously, as you say, home to Army Material Command and so many other important functions across DoD, actually, across the federal government even. What we recognize is that as we start to build new operations systems and new platforms, we have to have the facility to house those platforms. So not only do we need to make sure our organic industrial base is modernized enough to be able to keep pace with the new platforms that we have to replenish, but also to make sure that we have the facilities, the maintenance facilities and so forth, to house those new equipment and to make sure that we're giving it state-of-the-art maintenance facilities and so forth and manufacturing facilities. And this is obviously a huge priority and part of our facilities investment planning.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobson. I yield back. The chair recognizes Ms. Katuta of Hawaii.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you everyone for your testimony and for coming before our committee. I've had some questions, as you can guess, on the Red Hill tragedy that took place in Hawaii. I appreciate the conversations we have had as well. Appreciate for all the testimony, including what you're doing and planning to do. But as we've discussed before, what's at the core of this is rebuilding a broken trust that exists right now. That takes more than words, it takes action, and it takes giving people confidence that the injustice that has happened is recognized and will not happen again. And so, you know, when I take a look at what is still being required in terms of questions about important information that they would like shared. Even the fact that video that was released by independent sources of the fuel leaking out and spewing out, quite frankly, of the Red Hill pipeline in November 2021 has still not officially been released right now. What efforts do we, what assurance do we have, I guess, Ms. Berger, that, you know, the information that people are demanding, the transparency and disclosure that people expect after something like this will actually take place, including a lot of the relevant FOIA requests that have been put forward so that the people of Hawaii can really know what happened and what will happen and can have confidence that the relationship going forward will be one of openness and of trust.
Congresswoman, thank you too for the time and recent conversations, and I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to engage across the Hawaii delegation with both on and off-island leadership and citizens and constituents to understand. I think that part of building trust is building understanding as well, and it comes from all sides who are involved. And so every day, we at the Department of the Navy and the Department of Defense need to make sure that we are being responsive, being transparent, providing that information. You note that there are some FOIA requests that have come. FOIA is a process that does take some time, but we will make.
If I could just interject here, since I am limited in time, do you feel that you folks have been, in fact, responsive? And I understand that FOIA is a process, but given the extreme urgency of having 20,000 gallons of jet fuel pumped into your water and people poisoned, your families worried about if they're getting sick because of what they're exposed to, do you feel that it has been responsive? Do you feel the timelines are fair, given the information people are demanding right now over Red Hill?
Congresswoman, if there are specific pieces of information that I can help you to find, I would be glad to.
I think we're taking a look at what people have been asking. It's been in the paper. It's been well documented. Again, and I know I'm running short of time and I want to continue this discussion. This really is a disrespect that happened to the people of Hawaii. What we're looking for is transparency and urgency. And regardless of the processes and the timelines that exist for things like FOIA, I think if we're going to rebuild what is a sadly, badly broken trust, it is about going above and beyond to make sure people have the timely answers to the questions that they deserve answers to and exposure to. So if I could go on, and I know we had a conversation, both Mr. Owens and yourself, about the post-closure plans. And even during my tour of Red Hill last week, I had mentioned that whatever the contractor, Nakapuna, was doing, that it had to be done right and well, or it would not only be a distraction, but it would be further mistrust, it would be further degradation of the relationship. So I was sad to see an article yesterday talking about the fact that this contract was an enigma because they couldn't get basic information about what the contract would do and how they would even engage. Would it be one-on-one? Would it be a website? They were actually told in the newspaper to go FOIA your request. That is not the response that we want. Is this acceptable that your contractors and subcontractors can operate in the dark? Well, again, people are asking for light and answers in this case.
Congresswoman, thank you for noting that. I saw the same article yesterday, and it is something that I have asked my team to help me to understand what happened there. I saw it yesterday for the first time, and will provide a response to your office.
Do you think that's acceptable of an answer? A company that you have hired to basically engage with the community, saying they will not explain how to the taxpayers of Hawaii they will be doing this?
Congresswoman, what's acceptable is a clear answer and a transparent process, and that is what I owe to you, and I will get to you.
Thank you, and you owe to the people of Hawaii as well,
Yes,
given what we have experienced. My last just comment here, because I know I don't have time for an answer. Infrastructure is a problem. Sadly, we're not surprised about Red Hill. We haven't been surprised about the Maui Space Facility, Schofield Barracks,
The
so many
gentlewoman's
others.
time has expired.
Thank you very much. Infrastructure is a concern. We need to keep up on this.
Thank you, Ms. Kahuta of Hawaii. Thank you. The chair now recognizes Mr. Jimenez of Florida for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Owens, what's the greatest existential threat to America today?
The pacing challenge for the Department of Defense is the People's Republic of China.
Okay. Ms. Jacobson, same question.
I agree with Mr. Owens' answer.
Okay. Ms. Berger?
Same, sir.
And Mr. Oshiba, same thing?
Same thing, sir.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I am 100% in support of Mr. Scott's assertion that any material that goes into our combat vehicles, none of it should be manufactured by the People's Republic of China. It would be insanity to have our greatest adversary supplying us with the materials needed for us to defend ourselves. Would anybody disagree with that? Any of you? I guess not. Okay. I am concerned, and I also am agreeing with our ranking member Jeremati about nuclear and small nuclear reactors to be able to power our military bases and essential infrastructure, military infrastructure. I am really concerned about solar panels, not only because the materials come from China and they're manufactured from China, but also from a security perspective. How do you defend them? Anybody have an answer for that? How do you defend solar panels? If you start putting out solar panels to power our bases, how do you defend that? How do you secure them?
Representative, I will take a stab. I think that the strategy for DoD is not dependent on any one technology. What we are trying to do is diversify our energy ecosystem in a way that allows us to be able to take advantage of multiple different sources of energy to be able to harden and make resilient all of the various aspects of how we procure and use energy. So that's electricity from wind, from solar, from nuclear, from gas, from diesel. All of those sources, when you deploy a distributed energy platform, disruption of any one of those things is not catastrophically problematic for the entire system, right? So mission assurance is guaranteed by diversity.
Now, we're talking about military bases now, especially in Europe, right? I mean, we're talking about trying to get away from Russian energy, et cetera, et cetera. And so when I started thinking about it, wouldn't solar panels be the most difficult thing to defend in a military base? You can't harden it. They have to be outside. So how do you defend solar panels? How do you defend wind power? That has to be outside too. So how do you do that in a military base?
Thank you for the question. I'll realizing that I am way over.
Humma, right? Humma.
No,
so
I
have you all figured that one out? Have you figured that out yet?
The solution
that you're now going to put in our military bases two sources of energy that are probably the most difficult things to defend against attack.
The solution is in much broader diversity than we currently have, and that makes for resilient, reliable.
Well, I would argue that it would be much more resilient and reliable to go with two nuclear, small nuclear plants than putting some wind and one nuclear plant. I would argue that because nuclear plants are much more reliable. They don't need wind. They don't need sun to power them, and you could probably fortify them much easier than solar and wind. This is talking from a pure. I'll yield the rest of my time back. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes Mr. Vasquez of New Mexico.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very pleased to see the Readiness Subcommittee's prioritization of MILCOM projects, space infrastructure, environmental protection, and energy resiliency. I would also like to thank the honorable witnesses here today for taking the time to speak with us this afternoon, for your public service to strengthen the defense of our nation. The military installations in New Mexico's 2nd District play some of the most critical roles in our national defense. But if you saw the condition of the infrastructure at some of these bases, you wouldn't believe it. For example, the service members at White Sands Missile Range and Holloman Air Force Base who are testing groundbreaking technologies are still living in communities with buildings built just after World War II. At a time when our military is struggling with recruitment and retention, we should prioritize improving the quality of life of facilities like housing and child development centers for our service members and their families. We ask them to do a dangerous job, and they deserve better. To make matters worse, the Air Force recently notified the New Mexico Environment Department in 2018 that PFAS is prevalent in surface and groundwater throughout the state, particularly in Albuquerque, right outside of Kirtland Air Force Base. And samples collected at Holloman Air Force Base also showed PFAS levels as high as 1.29 million parts per trillion. Experts state that the lifetime of drinking water exposure to these toxic chemicals is 70 parts per trillion. That's over 18,000 times the lifetime level of exposure, and we should do more to protect the health and well-being of our service members. I think the time to act is now, and I look forward to discussing these important issues with you all. As a former city councilor in the city of Las Cruces, New Mexico, where the National Guard was found liable for contaminants of PCE in a Superfund site that cost the city of Las Cruces $6 million, we as a city with limited resources had to go to court with the Department of Defense in order to clean up those contaminants because they were found by the EPA to be in the drinking water of our residents. That, to me, as a local elected official, was an unacceptable response from the Department of Defense not to accept the liability that it later took a local government to be able to find at fault. Now, my first question is for Mr. Owens. Mr. Owens, could you provide just a quick status update on the department's efforts to completely phase out all firefighting agents containing PFAS by 2024?
I'd be happy to, and thank you for your commitment to this issue. It's vitally important that the full department takes its responsibility to deal with the legacies of the decisions that we've made. In January of this year, the department, the Navy, certified a military spec for a PFAS-free firefighting foam. The military departments we are in the process now of certifying that those formulations do in fact work, and after that, the military departments will be implementing their phase-out plans according to the plans that they've developed.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. And can you provide any insight on specific steps that the department has taken to ensure that aging legacy infrastructure like family housing, child development centers on installations are being properly modernized as mandated in previous NDAAs?
My first job out of college was working as an energy manager at Fort Belvoir, which is just south of here, and I have sort of lived both ends of this now in terms of the infrastructure challenges from an installation level and from a department level. I think that there are the FSRM backlog, the challenges that we have facing a chronic underfunding of the infrastructure maintenance and the deferred maintenance and repair is a very big problem and something that I'm going to be focused on going forward. And I look forward to partnering with the military departments to make sure that we are bringing the resources that are needed to modernize and repair these pieces of infrastructure, particularly on the housing side.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. And that is something that I believe myself and other members of this subcommittee in a bipartisan way are willing to work on to make sure that there's accountability. And that I can tell you it is very hard to attract not just service members, but families to the missions at Holloman Air Force Base when there is a danger that they will be ingesting toxic chemicals from buildings that have asbestos and other chemicals that have yet to be remediated, despite the record investments that we have made in our defense budget year after year. I think this is a critical readiness component, especially where we are handling such critical missions in places like White Sands Missile Range and Holloman Air Force Base that are so critically important to the defense of our nation. Lastly, just one more quick question with these 15 seconds I have. Ms. Jacobson, are there any plans to nominate White Sands for any additional ERCIP, energy resilience and conservation investment projects, as far as you're aware?
May I take that for the record and let you know?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Jacobson. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Vasquez. The chair recognizes Mr. Moylan of Guam for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Berger, were you in Guam recently? I thought I saw you. Were we sitting next to each other at the commencement there of the Camp Ben Blas? Well, thank you for coming to Guam.
It's nice to see you again.
I appreciate that. And so I do have a question for you. So in 2005, the USS San Francisco ran aground in the Western Pacific and was successfully repaired on Guam. By contrast, when the USS Connecticut ran aground in 2021, it proceeded to Guam. It languished in the harbor and was unable to be repaired. So, Ms. Burgess, can you please speak to the dangers posed by America's backside in ship repair capacity in the Western Pacific and the importance of facilities such as Guam, now closed dry dock?
It is very nice to see you again, and it was a